I just want to do a quick intro here before I introduce our guest, Kieran. I'm founder and CEO of Reforge. And if you also haven't checked out our podcast, Unsolicited Feedback, you should do that with Fareed Masavat, my co-host there. That is a whole host of fun. If you're new to Reforge, real quick, Reforge is all about how do we bring the world's expertise to your side? And we do that in three different ways. We do it with incredibly deep, action-packed courses around all sorts of different topics, step-by-step guides that are created by experts like Kieran to solve monthly and medium-sized problems, and then artifacts, which are like the real historical work from actual operators. They're not just templates, but the actual PRDs, the actual product strategies, the actual product visions, so that you can kind of mimic those that have solved before you, so you never have to start from scratch. And of course, we love AI. If you haven't checked it out, we have AI integrated across all of our courses, guides, and artifacts to help you kind of manage this huge transition shift in our industry. But most importantly, we have the free Reforge extension. If you use Chrome or Arc and a couple other browsers, this thing will sit alongside your work. It actually can understand what you're working on, like a go-to-market plan, a product roadmap, and it brings all of the Reforge expertise to you to give you feedback, help you generate drafts of different documents, as well as just see how others have done it before. That's free. So if you want to check it out, go to reforge.com. For this session, real quick, there is a Discord channel if you want to have some general chatter with other attendees. I am not going to be paying attention to the Discord channel in the session, but that's for you all to connect with others attending this. We will take some Q&A. You can use the Q&A feature in Zoom that's at the bottom of your controls. Use that to see what either suggest a question or upvote other people's question. I'm just going to work them into the flow of the conversation as we go through it. But other than that, I want to introduce our guest today, somebody I got a very fortunate few years to work alongside, Kieran Flanagan. He's the SVP of Marketing at HubSpot. He also has an amazing podcast with the CMO of HubSpot called Marketing Against the Grain. He also has this really fun free AI email course that he created, all using AI, including the videos. Kieran, I'm sorry, but the AI video version of you is still a tiny bit creepy, but it was really insightful and interesting to check out. I'm sure he can tell you about that. But the thing I'm excited to talk to Kieran about today that he's going to introduce is the AI marketing playbook and some of the things he's playing with. One of the things I respect most about Kieran is that he's just not kind of sitting up at a 10,000-foot view as an SVP of a public company, but he is going to the ground floor, playing with this stuff on a daily basis, kind of leading the charge. And so I think we're going to kind of switch back and forth between strategy to tactical examples and things along this way. So I'm going to hand it over to him. He's going to do about a 10-minute intro on some of the things that he's seeing in the AI marketing playbook. And then we're going to jump into discussion and questions. I'm going to press him on a couple of his points here just to get his opinions. But Kieran, I'm going to switch over the slides to you and let you take it from here.
Cool. All right, let's do this. Okay, cool. I thought what we could do in terms of starting here is just like set the scene. Kind of where are we in terms of building marketing and go-to-market playbooks for the company, and where are we going? There's two core things that really resonate with me as I think about how you grow a business long term. And I'll start actually with the closed web to open web. One of the things that I've enjoyed about being a marketer over the last like 15 years is kind of building my career within the open web era. So the open web is basically we learned how to create things of value and distribute those things through these kind of platforms, whether it's Google or social or these other platforms. And what we really try to do is get people back to our website so we can convert them into a customer. What actually started to happen is all of these platforms got a little greedy. They start to not want you to promote your links. We've seen it across all of the social platforms. If you look at the data, it will show you that on average, posts where you actually include a link get like anywhere between 3 to 6 times less engagement. And you see everyone on LinkedIn going, hey, like linked in the comment or DM me for link, right? So like we're trying to figure out how to get around them, but we can't. So Google is this last bastion of like the open web, right? Like, wow, we still have Google. 63% of all referral traffic around the internet comes from Google. So they get a bad rap, but wow, we have a great thriving digital economy because of Google. What is happening to Google? Google is moving towards where social is today, right? It's added feature snippets. We ran a bunch of studies at HubSpot when feature snippets came out years ago, and we could see there was a high degree of decrease in the amount of traffic keywords would get if the feature snippet was shown. Feature snippets is basically Google with the little box answering your questions so you never have to go to the website. AI is just an evolution of that. They've released AI overviews. I know they've pulled it back, but that is the direction that they are going, and that they want more of the traffic to stay on their web. They want more on their website. They want to answer it more within a single interaction. And so it's an interesting time where we're moving much more towards this kind of closed web era where it's going to be harder for us to distribute our content and things like that through all of these different platforms. The other thing that's happening is marketing is becoming much less measurable. So we were lucky in the past 10, 15 years to be able to really measure a lot of marketing, look at the direct attribution, how much money do we get back from the expand. That is going away or actually really in decline because of privacy laws, because of some of these closed web platforms being harder to actually track. And so it's becoming harder, especially harder for founders because founders really struggle with like, oh, I can't measure it. You're telling me it's good, but I don't know how it turns up into revenue. And they're the two kind of shifts that I see happening, right? Closed web, open web to closed web. Marketing is becoming less measurable over time. Um, and what's really happened is it's forcing us to compete more aggressively in the places that we are today, but also it opens up a bunch of opportunities of where we can go in the future. So I was like a good today and tomorrow slide. Brian Balfour was famous within HubSpot for having this singular slide where we can paint the
He
picture of
is.
the today.
Yeah,
You,
I
you
remember
remember
that
the,
one all the
yeah,
time. Yeah,
everyone
yeah.
who went through the HubSpot is like, we know how to do, the one thing we've learned is we know how to do a good today and tomorrow slide. And so if you look at like the today and tomorrow, you have like today, right? We've learned inbound. Inbound was creation of content through channels, acquire traffic back, convert into customers. Now, I don't think that is going to go away, but we are going to have more competition for a pie that is growing less or more slowly, right? So just really increase competition. And I think that means we're going to have to use AI tooling to be able to do much better work. And we can get into that in this conversation. Social changes for B2B companies. It's kind of been this way for B2C companies, but in particular for B2B companies, we kind of use social as a distribution channel. Like, how do we create things on there to get people off the platform onto our website? We're going to actually have to start to think about how we grow real audiences on these channels that we can monetize in a different way. Segmentation is going to change, like how we segment or how we personalization is going to change. How we personalize today is we create segments, we see commonalities in segments, and we personalize one-to-many within that segment. AI creates a ton of leverage in the middle and the bottom funnel, like of that customer journey, and it allows us to do much better personalization, which I think is the place that most people understand around AI. And then we have the direct attribution to indirect and direct attribution, which isn't AI specific, but I wanted to round out the story. In terms of that AI-enabled work, right? We have more competition. We're going to have the same amount of traffic or maybe diminishing returns over time. If traffic pay gets saturated, search gets saturated, search declines over time because you have things like AI overviews. And I think that means we are going to have to enable people fighting for that traffic to do higher leverage work. And I've got a kind of, this is one of the examples. So I've kind of been on this listening tour, talking to venture firms, talking to founders in the AI space to see what really is working, what is not working within go-to-market. One of the kind of frameworks that I see is these AI tools that basically help marketers do much better work through this kind of framework that I put together, where they can build external context through the inspiration that they gather, right? So let's say you are a paid marketer or a content marketer. You can actually see what good looks like from the very start, right? It can actually go get paid ads that perform really well for your products like yours. It can go get content that ranks really well for product and companies like yours. And then it can take that and build you like a bunch of external context to say, hey, this is what good looks like today. And what I'm really curious about at the moment, and we can get into this in the discussion, is like how AI can extract the information to understand what good is and then templatize it, right? And so some of these tools create the external context, and then use an AI assistant to create templates that show you what good looks like. Then you can scale good much more rapidly, test it, and then you can build internal context, which is the analytics you gather to make the recommendations better for future iterations of whatever marketing task you're doing. The other thing is on the social. So we went from social distribution to social audiences. I think creators have come in and taken a lot of the kind of attention away from brands and marketeers, right? Marketeers have been like very focused on traffic acquisition, not on how do we build social audiences, especially when in B2B. Gary Vaynerchuk recently wrote a whole book, usually on the right trend around day trading attention, because attention is going to be the scarcest commodity. And I think we are going to have to figure out how to show up in some of these channels much in the same way a creator would, like not like a typical tech brand, not like a typical SaaS brand, much more like a creator would. It's part of the reason that we actually acquired The Hustle in HubSpot, because we believe this was going to be an integral part of the future, and AI-enabled tools can help you do this much more rapidly at scale. It can really help marketers unlock their creativity. And again, we can get into the details within our talk. This one, I think, is the least controversial part, right? We segmented by personalization. We look for commonalities. We use personalized tokens and said, okay, well, like you're like that person, so you'll probably react pretty well to this form of marketing. AI personalization, like AI allows us to create a concierge type experience. We actually called it that within Zapier, which is basically when we did onboarding within Zapier, we created this concierge type experience that could basically answer your questions, be with you through the entire onboarding process, be with you when you're a customer, start to interact with you, talk to you, learn about who you are, and try to make that experience much more personalized, either through the emails, through the chat, and I can get into more examples as part of the talk. And so I think that we can create this kind of one-to-one experience, whereas if we're losing some of the volume at the top, we can get leverage in the middle and the bottom of the funnel from AI to actually hopefully still continue to grow in a really great way. And then the indirect attribution is honestly not AI specific, but I wanted to round out the conversation because I think this is a real thing that's happening in marketing today. It is becoming less measurable, and actually it's becoming much harder in some cases to explain the value of the work marketing are doing, especially if we are moving towards this kind of creator-led and social, where it's a lot of correlation to customers signing up, or we're doing brand, all these kind of different things. It's much more correlation than causation. And so there's a ton of things to get into in the direct and indirect attribution. So that's kind of setting the scene, and I think we can probably get into each of the 4 places, but that's what I see as that AI marketing playbook in the future, which is like inbound, AI-enabled inbound, social distribution to social audiences, brackets, creator-led, segmentation, personalization to one-to-one personalization, direct attribution to a much more mixed indirect and direct attribution. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, that's great. So before we get into the strategic part, I would love to just start off with like maybe some ground floor, a couple tactical things that you've been playing with. We were actually riffing before this. Both of us were playing with Claude, the last couple days, the new model, the artifacts feature. Not to be confused with Reforge's artifacts feature. For those of you that don't, for those of you who don't know, who haven't played with the Claude artifacts feature yet, it basically you can ask it to generate any sort of type of asset or document and then iterate on that in the chat. And so that goes for everything from code to maybe like a social post to some other things. But Kieran, I'm interested in like what you've been playing with there and like what feels new, like what's impressed you about it that you've struggled with in, your other tests and trials the past year.
Yeah, so I think the first time I put out, so the way that I learn is I do, and then I've started to put things in courses for free because it forces me to learn. And the first one was I used AI to recreate timeless marketing principles. So I would try to recreate something that David Ogilvy was good at, a person called John Caples, all of these different marketeers from the past, and try to recreate the thing they were really good at. And I get into some of those examples within this discussion, but I want to talk a little bit about Claude because I was playing with it over the last 2 days. So I told you I was sent a tool, and this tool kind of took long-form content and then actually created short-form content from it. There's a bunch of these kind of AI tools that take long-form content and then create short-form content, whether it's social posts or short-form video clips. What I've always like really been obsessed by with AI is when AI can actually distill out why something is good, right? Like if you give it an ad from David Ogilvy. If you give it a piece of incredible content, and I had all these kind of business memos that internal CEOs, famous CEOs wrote, and I was like, hey, why is this a great business memo? Distill out like in bullet points. Give me a writing style. How do I recreate this? And it's never been very good. Like it always kind of goes to a generic best practice, right? Best
Yeah.
practice. Like here's how you can do this. And I was, and but the reason I really care about that is because if you can distill out what good looks like and create a template from it, then boy, you can actually scale your work so much more rapidly. And so what I was doing over the past 2 days with the new Claude model is I was kind of, I'll take the example of Twitter. And so, or X. And so I would take a long, I would go to a podcast. I would use a tool to get the transcript. I would have Claude create templates for the most engaging tweets. Like, what are the types of tweets that get the most engagement? Create that as a template, extract all of the information from this podcast, and then create a bunch of talking points. And I can get into more details because I'm going to skip over all this so I can get to the part of the writing template. And then basically, I want to create a writing style. So I can take the talking points, add a writing style, and create Twitter tweets from the templates. And so what I did is I went and took some really good writers. Like one of my favorite writers is Sean Perry, who's like one of the hosts of the My First Million. And I basically said, hey, here's a bunch of writing from Sean. Why is this good, right? And I give it a template to recreate of how you would create a writing style. And it bullet pointed out why Sean's writing was so good. And it was like spot on, right? Like how he formats things, his sense of humor, like all of these things, it distilled them into just a bunch of bullet points. And when I applied those, when I applied that writing style to the talking points I extracted from the podcast template, I told you I sent a LinkedIn post that it created for me using one of these templates in LinkedIn. We're using these templates and their writing style. I sent it to Kip, my good friend. I was like, "What do you think of this LinkedIn post? You think this is going to blow up? It's something I wrote." And he's like, "Oh, that's a great post. Yeah, it's like you've hit the nail on the head. It had like the personal touch, like personal story. I was
Yeah.
in a hole. I was in a bad place. Oh, I've come around now, and everything is great." Because
Yeah.
the actual LinkedIn template it created for me was the personal story, right? Like, and it actually got everything right from line by line. And then I applied Sean's writing style. And it was like the last time I created a course, the light bulb went off my head, and I was like, wow, I can now templatize good. Um, and that was the first model that did it. I've tried it on GPT 4.0. Maybe I'll go back and try it, but like I came on the podcast 10 minutes early and I didn't even let you talk. I just talked about this. When I see something like this, I can't stop thinking about it. Like I literally have so many ideas on prompts that I can create to start to like rapidly uh create incredible like content things.
Yeah. So, so that's an amazing example. Let me jump into the strategic level here. One of the key principles of your AI marketing playbook is like that today or historically we've been in inbound and tomorrow we're moving towards AI enabled inbound. And, one of the core premises of inbound is around how do I, you know, create helpful experiences where my customers live, right? Like that's kind of like one of the core premises. Underneath the surface, it seems like looking historically, the those that have been most successful with the inbound playbook, the thing that sits at the center is SEO. And the
Mhm.
reason is because it's a huge part of generating the compounding returns to inbound because I create a piece of content once and it ranks and it kind of delivers value over a long period of time compared to, you know, how like creating like content in a social channel, which is very temporal. I create it, I get a little bit of attention and then nothing. Right. And so,
And then I feel
and
totally bad about myself.
yeah, and so a core part of that loop is SEO, but I think one of the things that you've mentioned and is that search is getting disrupted. It's not like searches are going down. I think you actually pointed out to me when we spoke on the podcast that searches are kind of going up a little bit. It's the traffic from searches,
Yeah.
the click-throughs that's going down. And that seems to maintain. And so I guess given that like is inbound actually, especially for a newer startup that's starting from scratch or a middle stage, is that inbound even viable economically without SEO being able to generate those returns over a long period of time? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes total sense. I think one of the things I'll just start off with by there's a couple of things when we talk about the disruption of search that I don't know if they're getting lost on people, but a question I get asked is like, why would Google even do this, right? I think it's interesting to think about that problem in relation to like how marketeers will use search going forward. There's two core things to know about this. Google likely didn't want to do this. Like they got pushed into it because of the disruption going on around them. And they are pretty intelligent people and they don't want to get disrupted by the likes of Perplexity or OpenAI is going to release a search agent apparently or a search site. Microsoft have their Copilot and Bing, like all of these different things are going around them. But the other thing that is really important in terms of what you said is they have seen through data that the amount of searches go up, right? And actually, that is good for them if they can monetize. It just means they're going to monetize in a different way, and it affects the organic because you get the answer within that first interaction. Now, what I would say is the thing that we did. First of all, when they launched AI overviews, they only launched it for 14% of all search queries. And so not everyone saw much of a impact on their traffic. In fact, we aggregate all of our customers' traffic so we can see a trend, and we didn't see any real trend among our customers. It's all pretty they're still actually growing organic traffic. There's not anything alarming happening. We definitely saw an impact because we have such coverage, right? HubSpot has a huge content search engine, so we definitely saw impact. So what we did is we started to categorize all of our traffic into a couple of buckets. First of all, transactional search is not impacted. Transactional search is I do a search because I'm going to take an action. And that action is I might be signing up for a free tool. That action may be I'm going to just navigate to someone's website. Whatever it may be, it's not like an informational search where you're trying to learn something. So that transactional bucket is pretty interesting. And the reason I'm calling that out is we might want to come back to this because what part of inbound has not just been the search part is like the creating things of value and a big part of that was free tools and the history of HubSpot was creating free tools.
Mm.
In that informational bucket, we've started to segment things into defensible and non-defensible to get ready for the fact that non-defensible, which is basically it's just an informational post and the AI can just create that post. Like it just is what it is, right? There's nothing unique in there. There's no unique data. There's no unique customer insights. There's no unique quotes. There's no unique expertise that we have that will differentiate it. It's just like, what is product marketing? Product marketing is really this thing, right? And that is the bucket that I think you have to be prepared to give up. And so when I say AI enabled uh, when I say inbound to AI enabled inbound, it's because the other bucket will still exist. I actually don't think that we go to zero because there's just complexity in the questions and what people want to learn. And it's hard to do that in a single interaction. And so you have to understand what you think is going to be the defensible part of that informational content, which is a part of inbound, and use the tooling to be able to spend more time to differentiate that content, right? Do I think there's going to be more like there's always winners and losers? Do I think the bucket of losers increases? Potentially. But everything gets more competitive. I can't like in the whole history of growing a business, every channel over time becomes way more competitive and veers towards like more less winners and more losers over time.
Yeah. I mean, I think the question, I mean, it totally makes sense for HubSpot, who already has this SEO content footprint that you're talking about, to be spending, a lot of time there. There's a lot to defend and maintain, and it's not going to it's on, even though it feels like everything's going to disappear overnight, sometimes it's probably not going
Yeah.
to, right?
Right.
I think the thing that I've been debating is like if I'm a new startup, like a new
Right.
SaaS startup, just getting into the space, right? It feels like that core part of the playbook is on the decline part of the S curve, right? And you cannot build a new startup by betting on a go-to-market motion that is in the decline part of the S curve. Like you have to hit something that's at the inflection or acceleration point. And so I don't know, like when you think about these principles, does anything change in your mind if you switch into Kieran, CMO of early to mid stage
Yeah.
startup?
Well, here's so this is a good topic to discuss and maybe debate. There's not something new that is good for a startup because it's not the new stuff is really I think in the two buckets. There's some new stuff in the social slash creator. If you actually look at like what's really fascinating, if you look at a lot of the research around B2B buyer behavior, and there's a lot of Gen Z and millennials buying software within companies now, they actually favor social and community-led search versus traditional search. Like the actual thing
Yeah.
about Google is it's getting squeezed in the middle. Like the blue links is in the middle, community search is here, and AI search is here, and that's like squeezing the blue links. And so, but that stuff is not trackable, right? So if I'm a startup, the challenge that I would have if I say I don't want to bet on the search and the paid and the kind of inbound tactics is then I have to bet on something where it's not easy to forecast and it's not easy to track. And startups are very reliant on a engine where you can say, I've got this amount of money and I need this amount of customers. And that's actually that's why I call out the indirect and direct attribution is that we've built a go-to-market predicated on the fact that we can build a pretty, and you know this because you're like a master at doing this, like a pretty scalable and forecastable model. And if that part of it is in decline, and the part of it that I think is showing signal that it's somewhat, on the up, like YouTube's still growing, TikTok's growing, all these kind of social video platforms are kind of still growing in some ways. They're not easy to run a forecastable and scalable model through. Like, should you do them?
Mhm.
Yes. Like, but will you be able to do that? No. And then I think where AI creates a lot of leverage, it's like the chicken and egg, is in the experience you can create for the demand that you capture. And so, but you have to capture the demand in the first place. And so like there's a real honesty to this question where I don't think there's a good replacement. Like there's not a new channel. Like Clubhouse didn't work out.
Yeah.
Right. There's
Yeah.
not a new channel where we can
Yeah.
actually pivot towards and say, this is going to be a growing channel. The one thing I will say is like, it's interesting, right? Like AI could be an unlock, not a boom for like product led has proven itself time and again. I think it's a really great go to market motion, but it's not like ubiquitous across all companies. But when you look at what's happened in transactional search has not fallen. So like people searching for tools or these kind of keywords where they want to take an action have not fallen. Code is being commoditized, so it's like much easier to create things. I do wonder if we start to run this constellation of app strategy where we take these kind of point solution or these singular use cases. Like Reforge are a good example where you're doing a bunch of this. Like you have a great uh you grow a number of like cool AI tools and you solve specific use cases. If you can create a constellation of app and drive people in that way where you solve a real use case, maybe we're going from like informational content to informational code. And the informational code is like instead of learning about the thing, you can actually do the thing through this singular tool that we built for you because it's inexpensive to do it.
Yeah. I think on the PLG stuff, I mean, I even see uh I mean, the product led motions rely on some form of a viral or, content loop. And I even see those things, among a lot of startups just not as effective as
Yeah,
they
because they don't have the
were
channel to,
when
yeah.
all the PLG companies we like to point to today were like on the rise. I don't think it's in the disruption phase like, as like a lot of search and SEO is, but it's certainly not in the inflection acceleration phase that it was X number of years ago either. So it's definitely a tough place to be.
And then
Okay, so you
I'll just
yeah.
round that because I think some people will say, well, what about optimizing for LLMs? Like if they're the new place where people go to get information, why not optimize for those things? All right, like just so we all know, search was hard enough. Actually, there was a data leak recently about how Google search worked. There were 14,000 parameters, right, that actually go into how something ranks. Imagine the world of an SEO trying to distill down like what are the actual parameters I should actually try to figure out to rank this content. And some of the SEOs, to be fair, they actually really do understand how to actually get to like the 10 things that really matter. LLMs are way more complex. Like they train on a data set now and again, right? So first of all, how do I have to wait till it retrains on the entirety of the internet. The next thing is we don't really understand, and nor do the people who are building these things, how it answers the way it answers. Like the best path you could take is try to get as many mentions as possible of your product beside words that you want to trigger your product for, right? So like co-citations, like how do I get my brand and product mentioned in as many sentences that when that sentence is asked by the LLM, well, it just says, hey, this must be the right answer. But I think like it is going to be hard to optimize towards LLM. I think the thing that actually will work is trying to make yourself synonymous with that thing across the web. And that is much more like,
Mm.
again, back to brand, back to how do I get my positioning right? And it's not going to be as easy to track the return on that or build a scalable and forecastable model around that.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to, we've actually mentioned that a couple of times. So let's just hit on it right now. So like that's the fourth pillar about indirect and direct attribution. I'm interested, like, are there tactical changes you are making internally at HubSpot on how you either prioritize or justify investments because you feel like that part of the world is coming?
I would say we have all of the same discussions that a startup would have, whether you're like series A, B, C, or D, where you're talking to your CFO and trying to explain the part of marketing that is not easy to look at in a simplistic chart where you can say, hey, like I spent this much and here's how many customers, and it's an ongoing like conversation of how we measure those things. And I don't think anyone has the perfect model for the causation. Like I think conversion lift studies are really good, where you basically run some sort of your marketing in half the country or certain states and don't run it in the other states. You look for the increase in customer conversions and then use some kind of ratio to attach to that marketing effort to say, hey, like it's worth X more customers over time. So our like so we can make, because we were benefactors of inbound, we've been able to make bigger bets on things that are less harder to track. Like the hustle
Right.
acquisition is a good example of that, right? That was like, we believed that being better at media and getting into the creator space was a bet worth taking, but it's not easy to track the return on that. And so when we were pitching to the board or the founders of HubSpot, they have to be believers in it, right? Because it's not
Hmm.
easy to give them the kind of one-to-one unit economics. That is much harder to do in a smaller company. There's much less leeway to actually say, hey, like I'm going to run this play and just believe me, trust me, it's going to work out. And I don't know if like I think part of a marketing leader's job in a smaller company, in a startup, is going to have to be part of that. Even a larger company, like it's all companies, marketing are going to have to make bets, defend their position, and be willing to be right or wrong. But they're still like, I do see startup founders. Like I talked to a really great founder recently and they're on fire, right? They're an early stage company and he was getting all of his demand because he had a really cool story. He was really good at social himself through LinkedIn. And I mean on fire, like growing really fast.
Yeah.
So these kind of founder led stories and the ability to plug in to these channels like a creator and turn up like a creator, they will drive momentum and demand for you. And you can kind of track it. But again, it's harder to, like, you and I would like to say, well, if we can kind of like figure out the inputs, like the amount you post, the amount of this, then we get X, we get the output of this. And this is how we scale it. It is harder to like build that model for those kind of channels.
Well, I think that gets to some of the social stuff you're talking about, which is like we've just gone through this whole shift of, especially the younger generations, people follow people, not
Right.
companies, right? And that's been largely
Exactly.
driven by, you can see that in our world among, the move to subs from company blogs to Substacks,
Substack.
right?
Yeah.
And among these social channels. And so, we used to be in this world where we could hire a lot of like mid-level IC content marketers to sort of scale a lot of these machines and aspects that we're talking about. But those that end up being now great at the content creation, like they don't want to be in those roles for the most part. And so
Yes.
do we just end up in a world where us as companies are just sponsoring 200 Substack letters, right? Like that doesn't feel
Well,
great either.
yeah. Okay. I love, so this is a great topic, right? So people, we are definitely in the, even the channels that are growing, the ones that I called out, like social video, YouTube, podcasting, they are hard to make work if you are a brand. Why? Because they're personality led, they're not information led. Like people really want the personality. And even when you're given the education, people care about the personality behind the education. And
For sure.
brands, it's hard to like attach a personality to a brand. It just really is hard to attach personality to a brand. So I think that people really matter. And so then you're like, to your point, if you're really good at this, why work for a company? I can tell you I've worked a lot with creators because we created a career program at HubSpot for this very reason. So when we really got into media and really started working with some of the hustle folks, it was really clear like how incredible some of these creators truly are, right? You know what I mean? Like it's an art. Like sometimes I used to think I could just create a YouTube short. It's going to be pretty easy and blow up. And then I talked to this creator called Jenny on the podcast, and she took me through a process of a 60-second video. And she thought more meticulously about that video than I think most Fortune 500 CMOs think about their entire annual marketing
$10
strategy.
million
She
campaign
knew
budget. Yeah,
every
yeah.
reason, everything was there due to human psychology and 2 years of testing and iterating. And and so you can either try to figure out how to create an environment where creators will work for you within the company, but I think that's hard. What we did at HubSpot is we created this creator program where we could actually partner with creators who could be part of our media network, and it's run more like a venture firm where if you're at the A, B, or C, or D, you get monetized very differently, and that those A, B, or C, or D is attached to how much engagement your podcast has, your YouTube channel has. So we have tried to think really creatively how we work with creators, and I think we had some advantage to that because we acquired the hustle and learned about creators and that space really rapidly. And all of the data would suggest that B2B creators are going to become a bigger part of the economy because you can, there's just, once you can start to really make a living on creating content within the B2B space, you're going to see more creators pop up. And I think they're going to become an ever-present part of our kind of marketing strategies. But it is a whole different way to figure out how to work with creators. Like it's a
Yeah.
learned skill that is, it's not easy um, to do.
Yeah. Okay, so we haven't touched on the core pillar around from segmentation to personalization. And so I've got like a two-part question here, and I want to work in one of the audience questions because I think it's a good one from Cordis. So the two-part question is, one is, I think when people think about one-to-one personalization, I feel like what occupies 98% of people's brains is like a personalized email, which is fine. Like more emails, like, like I'm sure it's going to happen, right?
Oh,
Like
it's
that's
that.
fine.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I'm interested in what other parts of marketing, either through like experiments that you're doing with HubSpot, besides email, do you think this personalization is going to attach? And then two, the question from Cordis is, does the increase in data privacy standards basically work against or oppose our ability to do a bunch of that one-to-one personalization? So do we have two opposing forces going on there?
Yeah, I think the first one is it is limited by channel, right? So I think like in the initiatives we're running across go-to-market, we have a pretty big sales assist motion through chat, and we're starting to really turn that into an AI enabled first channel where AI can create a really great chat experience. Like the actual difficulty, like when you really get into this, there's a ton of nuance. One of the interesting things about the complexity there is when someone talks to an AI, the AI is fine tuned on previous chat logs and it just wants to solve that problem. So if I turn up and I have a customer support channel on my website or customer support problem and I use chat on the website, if you're a human, you're actually pretty good at like, and we have a sales assist motion. So the objective is to book a meeting with a sales rep. And and so that normally would say, hey, it's a support issue, and they really dig in to see it. Is it a support issue or is there like an expansion opportunity, right? And if it's a support issue, cool, go here and resolve the issue. If it's an expansion opportunity, dig in, do discovery, and then like and figure out if that's worth a rep's time or not. And the thing that AI struggles with is that inference of cues. Like it's like, oh, cool, I did my job. I solved the support, but it doesn't know how to like get in and do that transition. And so part of it is like how you have an AI first enabled sales assist motion, but it's through chat. I don't think there's anything like unique about that channel. Like we all have heard about AI plus chat. The second one is like, I will say that I agree. Like we all know the personalization through email. The only thing I will say is it's surprising the upside you can get. Some of the conversion uplifts in HubSpot that the team have run and seen is actually surprised me. Like I came back in and I was like, yeah, but there's a range when you do these email tests. It's like just there's a range because of the open rate and the click through rate. It's not going to be monumentally like impactful, right? But then they're getting conversion uplifts of like 70, 80, 90% through really thoughtfully personalizing the email. So I will say it reset my expectations. Yeah, sure, it's email, but wow, there's a ton of upside in that email. The next part is I do believe marketing, because they are the automators, will be able to do a lot of things that are traditionally done by other teams. They will be able to like build ICP research and do a bunch of the prospecting and be able to like delineate between like good fit, bad fit, like the intent to make sure their sales reps are only working good fit demand. So that actually does mean that that experience is more personalized because the person is talking to a rep who's actually has real buy-in intent. The next part is you can create a lot of context for the rep to make sure the initial call is very personalized. So you can actually grab information about that person and then say, hey, this is the problems that person has. This is tends to be the solution. And these are the products and features that solve it, right? And so when the reps get in on that first call, they're not having to jump in and like learn all these things. They have all of that context up front. And it also makes that person feel like that rep has done some really great research, right? I actually understand problem solutions. I have the information in front of me. Like this, people like you tend to use these features and they kind of solve those problems. Customer support, very similar. You can create a much more personalized experience in terms of the and then like website, you should be able to create a much more dynamic personalized experience via website, but that has always been a sticky
It's
point
always
for
been a
me. Is like,
promise, but it has
yeah, it's
never.
never
It's
delivered.
been
So I don't know.
tough.
Like
It's been tough. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
never really delivered. In terms of the privacy, I don't know. That's my honest answer. Like I'm based in Europe, so I assume that I'm not eventually going to be allowed to do anything at all. I'll
Yeah.
give you the like. There was one of the best like just for any Europeans. There was a really great tweet. Right, I don't know if you're in Europe for the last month we have bottled water, right? And like every time I open the top doesn't come off, it's strapped to the thing, so you can't, and I think it's a glitch. And someone had a really great tweet about American innovation and European innovation, and basically that's a thing that Europeans have decided they've invented, which is like you can't pull the cap off because it's meant to be better for the environment. And the American innovation was like everything NVIDIA are doing, right? We've invented like the cap that stays on the bottle, and NVIDIA have invented like AI, right? Like that. So I suspect in Europe, eventually I'm not going to be allowed to do anything much creatively. But yeah, I privacy. I do believe that AI is going to cause a ton of privacy laws to get rethought and get implemented. Like we already see it in Europe. Like Apple's not even able to launch their new tools here because of it. So I don't know how that goes. I really don't know how that plays out.
Yeah. I'm interested just how are you so you're in the weeds yourself, but what are you doing with your team to help manage to like transition to this new
Yeah,
playbook?
this is a good one. I think you can break it into like like individual ownership and then team initiatives. And so I think that the ownership should be on the person. All I should have to do is supply a license, and that person should be curious enough to want to figure out how to integrate it into their workflow. I believe if you have to like sit over someone and say, use AI and figure out what you can do with it, then maybe that is just not the right person to be on the team. Because I think the best trait you can have in this day and age is curiosity, like deep curiosity. I think the people who are worse at AI is like, I do this thing and I should just do the exact thing in AI. And I'm not curious if I can make it better or different. But then you have team initiatives, which are these small pods. We all who've worked in growth know the pod model. So we have like 5 core initiatives in HubSpot, which are much more like moonshots of how we can do transformational work to augment the go-to-market. And that's more like these pods of incredible people doing AI work across like the most impactful parts of the go-to-market. So part of it, I think, is like the individual has to take ownership to how they can do their job better, and then part of it is the company have to decide where they want to go big with AI. And the one thing I'll say about the second part is, I think a lot of companies probably look at things right now and say, well, it's just not good enough to put in front of a customer, and I'll just wait to see if it gets better. And I think where you have to decide where you want to sit as a customer or as a company is basically, do you believe that will be a solved problem or not? And if you believe it will be a solved problem, you should build the infrastructure, the processes, and everything in place to actually go after that use case and just wait for the model to get better. I think if you sit and wait until the models get better and then start building these use cases, you're going to be in the middle pack,
Too
and that
far
middle
behind.
pack is in a bad
Yeah.
spot, right? Now maybe you're like on the fence with AI. I'm definitely on the these are all solved problems. And so I'm going to build use cases with like a good example is I believe voice is going to be a solved problem, and that like you can have a call with someone to book a meeting with someone and answer questions with someone, and it will feel like a one-to-one type experience. I believe that is a solved problem. It is not a solved problem at this very day, but I believe it's solve problems in 12 to 18 months. So we should figure out what that actually means for the go-to-market.
I think that's right. Like, I don't know if you've, I picked up the language learning app Speak recently, which is like you learn by just talking basically to your phone and it talks back. And yeah, it's not perfect, but it's pretty incredible like how great the audio quality is and sort of just the conversing back and forth.
Right.
So you can start to easily see that extend to other areas as well. I think I have time for one more question, but I want to touch on that individual ownership piece because somebody asked, and I think there's a lot of questions about like where do you start with that individual ownership? Like, is prompting like an actual real skill that I need to learn? And I've heard you create some analogies like you gotta talk to these things like they're interns. So I'm just
Yeah.
interested on like your view
Uh,
on that.
I would spend all of my, so maybe this is all maybe this gets like AI'd away. I really think the value is still in the prompting. Like the different, like I talked to the CPO of Adobe's new Gen AI platform, and it really shone through when I was asking about fine tuning versus prompting through these things. Like he was telling me, look, if you can really prompt engineer, the difference in output is stark. And that's where I've spent time trying to figure out how to get better at is prompt engineering. And honestly, it is stark. Like the differences between a generic prompt and a really contextual prompt is like magnitude of orders of difference. So if you're still the person who like says, "Hey AI, like go do some work," the way I kind of described that was like you're telling like an eager intern or junior employee, "Hey, go do work, like, and come back and give me something," and then you're like displeased and you're like, "Oh, well, I'm not going to use you again." You're the problem, not the AI, right? You actually have to be really good at how to instruct that person, provide context, and iterate with that person and show them what good looks like. That's why I'm so obsessed with these templates. Like, how do I AIify what good looks like and create these templates? So if you are getting poor results from AI through prompting, I suspect that you are the problem in a lot of cases, not AI. And I don't want to like, I'm not just saying this. So when AI takes over, it goes and listens to the next training set, and I'm on the recorded podcast, like bigging it up. So it keeps me, as it keeps me in work. I really believe that like if you can really learn these skills, the output you'll get from the AI is going to be much, much better. But if I was like one thing I would try to do is like get much better at prompting. I think that is the place you can still get a ton of leverage if you learn it correctly.
Cool. All right, we got to wrap there. Kieran, okay, if you want more from Kieran, he's got his website, kieranflanagan.io. He's got the Marketing Against the Grain podcast with Kip Bodner, the CMO of HubSpot. Anywhere else you want them to go to
Follow
check
me
you
on
out?
LinkedIn. I'm trying
Oh
to
yeah.
get
Okay,
to
there you go. Yeah,
100,000
yeah.
followers.
All the places, LinkedIn. All right. You can see the whole list of events at events.reforge.com. It's going to be a great lineup. Don't forget to check out reforge.com. You can check out our new AI Chrome extension that brings all of this knowledge and expertise that we have in Reforge into your work, right into the PRDs, the go-to-market plans, all the things that you're creating along the way to help you be way more productive, like Kieran is talking about. Other than that, thanks for joining, everybody. Sorry we didn't get to the amazing list of questions. Limited time. Kieran, thank you so much for joining. We'll talk
Thanks,
to you soon.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.